today, with a further expansion, there is still sufficient capacity given the numbers that are feeding through from current encatchment, since Camborne children now feed to Camborne Village College and not into Comberton Village College.
So just to add on, so developers creating more demand on education will be required to give money to the schools that will be serving those children, so that if there isn't capacity, they then have the money to build more classrooms. Bigger hall was one of the things they were talking about here. So you don't just get housing thrown at you without getting the money to go with it to allow you to mitigate for that. So yes, so I'll come to you next, please.
So to do this in subject. So how many feeder schools you already have that feed, like in our situation, that feed into Comberton?
There's eight
Because
at the moment.
obviously there's a great big, it's not just our village that's expanding.
Sure.
I don't know about the other villages, but they possibly expand as well.
Good point.
And also, although the children would get money to fund Comberton, have you got a big enough site to build onto that?
Okay, no, I mean these are important. I did have a discussion over the summer with Hazel Belchamber and another officer at the local authority, just to check out that there are some small pockets of development, I'm told, potentially across the catchment area, that I did ask that specific question, might lead to perhaps another 10 per year over the period of the next 5+ years, if they come to pass, if they get through planning, if they're open in 5 years and beyond, could add an average of about 10 per year, which, with the numbers we're talking about here, still could be accommodated. Obviously the really big developments plans a whole further phase of Camborne. That's a whole totally further conversation about potential for significant secondary development for that community there, and that's obviously where the really big growth, again in South Cambridgeshire, the forthcoming applications are coming through. Again, I'm led to believe. I suppose the point about 106 money, and if there were money to help is fine, and could be very helpful. I have to be honest enough to admit that Comberton Village College didn't actually knock down any classrooms when it went from 300 to 240. So there probably is spare capacity in the school now. There's 3-year groups now that are fed in with 240. Governors have said we can take 250 in a year group, no problems at all, and have done that when the demand's been there. Year 10 and Year 11 at the moment actually both still have 300 in, because that's feeding through with Camborne children. Given that actually there are the same number of classrooms, that's why I make the point, if it did become necessary, you could increase the admission number to accommodate if yet more developments came along in the sort of house building agenda, even without building. That's not to say people like myself wouldn't say, well, we could do with some money to help to do certain things, but the truth is the classrooms actually potentially do exist, and clearly the site itself therefore does exist to be able to accommodate, well, it has accommodated 5-year groups of 300 in a year group in very recent history.
Well, what about the sixth form? Because I just got the sixth form, because I've heard that the Camborne sixth form feed into Comberton, and then depending if you have a large intake of sixth forms one year, that obviously that reduces your places further down the school. Is that right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So there's a question about whether there's capacity at the sixth form. Now, Comberton Village College have opened their sixth form 2 years ago?
4 years ago.
4 years, gosh, time flies. Four years ago. And there are some Gamlingay children who go there. It's got a tremendous reputation. So it's a question about whether there's capacity there with Camborne feeding into it. But I suspect, we need to have a discussion about what the sixth form opportunities are, because obviously there's the sixth form colleges.
I think as a general principle, I can sort of answer. I mean, sixth form is a free market. There's numbers of opportunities, and many students in the Cambridgeshire area move around at the end of Year 11, depending on their preferences, type of courses, fine. The sixth form was built with a very nice new premises, because we were able to get a grant to do that about 5 years ago, before the world of educational finance just seemed to change, for at least 350. We think we can accommodate 340. We think we can accommodate 400 comfortably with pre-existing premises. There's 370 odd at the moment. There's no plans to build a whole replicated sixth form at Cambs at the moment, because it would be a replication, that wouldn't be sensible. However, there are in the system, if you get to a certain size of sixth and want to expand that, there are ways, if it's believed that's a likely scenario, that capital grants can be applied for to expand the sixth form. We wouldn't be able to expand the sixth form beyond what we can cope with unless we got that further money in, and that's what we'd be seeking to do as and when we thought it was genuinely likely that the numbers might go much beyond 400 in the sixth form. That would be an important decision that might have to be taken at some point.
Okay, sorry, could we let somebody else have a question, please? Hello, yes, hello.
Well, I can ask afterwards.
I might just ask if the school had concerns about the amount of children coming in, obviously going to other schools, which is part of the decision being made to go to Comberton, which I'm not denying is a good school. But I mean, I've got 3 children, 2 here and 1 in the village college. So it's kind of, my concern is what will happen to, I don't really want 2 children at Comberton and 1 in the village college, because that means, divide for me. My children are going to be hopefully, doing different clubs and things. And I feel like I'm going to be all over the place.
So your question specifically about how you will manage having children in two different schools, even though you're quite likely to have it anyway when your older children move on to Stratton, and you'll have children in Stratton and possibly children still at Gamlingay Village College.
Yeah, I mean, is the college still going to be open then?
Well, as I said before, I can't answer those questions. When I talked to Mr. Burkitt on Thursday last week, he said, those questions really have to be, put to the governors of Stratton Educational Trust. This isn't a consultation about closing Gamlingay Village College, and myself and Sebastian, the district councillor, we certainly don't want to see that happen. We think there are opportunities, to have 2 exceptionally good schools in the village with different offers and with different pathways. And I believe we had some information about communities where that does happen. Both, you have 2-tier and 3-tier existing alongside each other, and because the schools are very good and because they're increasing parent choice, so you can choose a 3-tier pathway or a 2-tier pathway, they are actually surviving. But to some degree, Gamlingay Village College's future is in its hands. Be an excellent school, and people, as they do at the moment, will continue to choose to go there. So I don't think I can do better than that, but it's probably a good idea to talk to GVC about that particularly.
Sorry.
But yes, sorry, do you want to
I think the first. Sorry, what's your name again? Sorry. The first part, I think you said about this decision has been made. The decision hasn't been made yet. This is just a discussion, a consultation, data gathering process to actually explore the situation. Yes, the governors have recommended that Comberton Academy Trust would be the best option if we were to extend our age and join the Academy Trust. But no decision has been made yet. That's one thing. And of course, the basis of the last answer was about development and more children and more people needing more classrooms. So of course, closing schools doesn't make a lot of sense when we are increasing the number of people and children in the area. So I think that needs to be taken into account. Sorry.
That's fine. Yes, lady at the back. Hello.
I have a child at Stratton Village College and here, and Stratton he's fine, we can leave him where he is, but the child who's in the village college, he's in year 6 at the moment. If he wanted to move to say Comberton, would he have automatic entry now? Or
Mr. Monday, can you?
Okay. I mean, clearly the particular proposal, we need to think about the very specific proposal that's being made here, which I hope I'm going to get this right on behalf of the governors here, would be to move into year 5 potentially next year, year 6 the year after, at which point then Comberton Village College takes into admissions for year 7, so that would be September 2018. Anyone can apply to Comberton Village College for a place right now, and governors would look at that and see if it was possible to accommodate, and would try to be accommodating with regard to that. I think clearly, and there's been an initial discussion about this in principle, that the process of potentially coming into the catchment area in due course would obviously, and also potentially part of the Comberton Academy Trust, would lead to a level of commitment and responsibility and desire to seek to be as accommodating as it would possibly be on behalf of the governors at Comberton Village College and the trustees right across the trust, and would look at ways of accommodating, particularly if there were difficulties with the schooling in any way at all that emerged, because obviously there'd be a feeling of responsibility and commitment with regard to that. It doesn't automatically flow from this particular proposal. I hope I'm getting the logic of this right, because the very specifics are year 5, then year 6, then somewhere to go in year 7. That's why we've got to have a catchment secondary school if that were to happen. But on the other hand, knowing that, there could be the possibility, again, there's got to be a process gone through to confirm the catchment area in the proper way. But if that's the case, and this school is part of the trust, obviously, governors and trustees feel a responsibility to seek to accommodate, if in any way reasonably possible. That would be the
What I don't
commitment.
want is him to have to stay in the village college until year 9, and then the actual village school isn't competent and has to join in year 9 and competent and miss out those 2 vital years.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to have the option of obviously going to competent or Stratton, and that's something we're going to decide upon, but I just need to know that that choice is there available for us as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good question, and I've had similar questions submitted there. But I think what Mr. Munday is saying is that it is not unreasonable for us to feel optimistic about year 6 children being able to transfer from the village
Well,
college.
certainly, yes. Of course,
straight
it's
through
worth
into
remembering that
college.
anyone in year 6 at the moment, year 5, can be applying in the general admissions round to secondary education, as numbers of Gamlingay children do, to come in, because from what I said, there's obviously a lot of places out of catchment. At the moment, anyone in Gamlingay, the schools here, would be deemed out of catchment, well, obviously, because that's not the catchment system at the moment. But because there are, as I say, this current year 7, 70 odd children out of catchment, next year similar numbers, even slightly less, I think, if I've got my figures right, from current feeder primaries projected to come through. Anyone who did apply from here, who wished to come to Comberton Village College, there are a lot of out catchment places, so actually could come through that system now, as numbers of Gamlingay families have chosen to do with current year 7 and indeed 8 and 9. That
Thank
is
you.
happening at the moment.
Okay, can I take one question, please?
Sorry, just quickly, catchment area would be Gamlingay or the first school?
It will be defined as whatever the catchment area of Gamlingay First School is.
Okay, so in theory, I've got a year 5 pupil that's now in Gamlingay Village College, because obviously this is a first school, it wasn't going to be a primary at that time. He is living in Gamlingay, so when he gets to year 7, he will, 9, he will presumably be indoor in catchment area anyway.
The way it works when there's a change is it's defined by year group, so it feeds its way through by year group, so it wouldn't be officially deemed to be in the catchment, because the catchment started with a named year group in a certain year that then feeds its way through. So if you look at some admissions policies, they're a bit complicated because they state by year which year it is and which it's relevant to, and it can change. So for example, at Comberton Village College at the moment, in years 10 and 11, it says Campbell, because Campbell children, it certainly doesn't in years 7, 8 and 9, because when Campbell was, that was taken out. So the children who are older than when it first started to apply from September 2018 for year 7 admission wouldn't automatically be included.
concern about, the
I
year
think
5, 6?
The answer is, there's much to be gone through over the next period of time. But for example, if this development were on the way, and if you wanted a year 5 child to enter Comberton Village College, I'm going to get my maths right here, September 2017, I think that's right, isn't it, year 7, you could apply in the general admissions round to start in September 27, and there will be very large out-catchment places available there, and people from Gamlingay are doing that, and all who've applied from here in the last 3 years now have got places at Comberton Village College because of the demographics in the local area, and that's projected to be the same for the next numbers of years. So that could happen at that phase if anyone made a choice to. I've got to be careful. I'm not touting for any sort of out-catchment business here, because that would be very wrong. I'm not doing it. I'm just trying to explain what can happen. So you could exercise that choice if you wish to exercise that choice, and that's how that could work, and that there would be places available to do that. If it happened outside of that, then it would depend on the particular scenario, I think, is all I can sensibly say.
Right. Do you mind if we crack on? Because I know there's still quite a lot of people. So could we like to take your question now?
I've got a question actually for Mrs. Desborough.
Jolly good.
It's about, I was wondering if you could explain why you want to join Comberton Academy Trust, because they've got no experience with primary, so they've got no experience with Key Stage 1 and 2. And obviously with this being first school, this school has only got experience up to year 4, which means that nobody has experience for those key years 5 and 6, those key SATs years. And I don't see this as the best option for this school, so I was wondering if you could explain how that's
well,
going to work.
Of the 12 members of staff that we have here, teaching staff, I've looked at all their qualifications. All of them are trained in full primary age range. 4 of them specialise in the early years, and 8 of them specialise in Key Stage 1 and 2. Of those 8, 7 staff have had experience of teaching 5, 6 previously. I myself taught in year 6 for 7 years. Obviously I know I'm not taking the teaching commitment, but I am leading teaching and learning within the school. With regards to that as well, obviously if we are extending our age range and children choose to send their people choose to send their children here in years 5 and 6, there would be a need to recruit, and with that need to recruit, we will always look for the particular specialism that is needed. So therefore, if we were looking to recruit because we had children that were being here for years 5 and 6, we would look to recruit 5, 6 specialist teachers. But actually within our teaching staff already, there are a number of us who have taught years 5 and 6 previously.
So could I go to Mr. Munday and just ask about your capacity to deal with primary school and why primary school should academise with you? I'm sure Mr. Munday will acknowledge that.
And I think absolutely, and I think what's crucial is the expertise in primary, as has been pointed out, lies here, and it's crucial that it lies here, and that staff here and the head here would absolutely take a lead on that. There is expertise and support to run schools more generally that exists across the trust. So for example, there's a Director of Education who's recently returned from a full year's secondment as one of Her Majesty's inspectors at both primary and secondary level, and is a lead inspector and carries on in that role, doing 3 inspections per term, but also has a role right across the trust, and he's equally experienced in that role, working with both primary and secondary. So in terms of looking at standards in schools, whether that be secondary or primary, any schools in the trust will work alongside the head and other teachers to be clear about what the standards were, what perhaps key particular areas for improvement might be, and plays an equal role there, so that there are staff obviously that can be helpful as much at primary and as secondary that exist to that specialist nature, together with also then obviously HR specialists, finance manager who's a qualified accountant, the IT manager who's come from a strong IT background out of education before coming in and working with numbers of schools, all of which are absolutely available right across the trust for all schools in trust, including primary schools. And clearly one would hope there's equal benefit to primary and secondary from those sort of specialists that can become available. And I think even for a bigger secondary, it's very hard to think of employing those sort of specialists. Clearly the smaller school is the harder it becomes, but as a bigger group, you've got all these people who can work right across all the schools, absolutely key to the notion that this is obviously not to do in any way with becoming an academy, joining the academy trust. That could sit outside. In fact, the first school could become an academy, join an academy trust, and then do either of the other two proposals. I mean, that's a proposal in its own right. This is absolutely to do with the catchment. The fundamental thing there, which Bridget or others might comment further on, is when in a catchment area, then there becomes local authority. One of the statutory responsibilities of local authorities is to provide appropriate home school transport, and the general rule of thumb is once it's over 3 miles away, then for up to the age of 16 or year 11, there is a responsibility for local authorities, for the county council, to provide that service, and that would obviously be a fundamental reason. I think it's up to governors to comment on this, but for joining a catchment area fishing and actually becoming part of that, rather than not doing so, because not doing so, there is no prospect. Hence, the only way it can happen is that parents work out their own arrangements, or, as happens a little bit now, Comberton Village College has, on behalf of some parents who do already want to send children here, and numbers of other villages, helped to put on a bus. Obviously, the costs of that have to be covered, hence why there is a cost associated with it now. But clearly, moving into a catchment area, and the local authority then would have to approve that whole process and say they think it's appropriate, then have a statutory responsibility, and that's when the free school transport comes into play. So that's why the catchment area bit, or one of the reasons why I totally agree with, very fundamental.
Okay. So if I could just add to that. So